Yeah, basic components to configure the two node cluster. Take a very simple prerequisites are there. One is here a minimum of two identical servers are required for us. Why we are saying two identical servers? Uh, Two identical servers means with which have configurations, same configurations like CPU same, memory same, CD drives are there. In server 2 also CD drives. As well as remember, OS must and should be same. In server 1, we have Windows Server 2016 Enterprise Edition. In server 2 also, Windows Server 2016 Enterprise Edition. Here, for example, SP1 is it. Here also SP1 must be there. See, even hardware level, some difference may be there. Here 32 GB RAM, here 64 GB RAM. Okay, in generally should be same, but remember even hardware level differences may be there, but OS must and should be same. Okay, two NICs are required say per server, two network interface cards. Why? Because in every server we need two cards. We need one is for public IP, private IP, public IP, private IP. Two cards are required here per server. Okay. Yes. We can have three cards also. One is for storage also, which is optional. Network interface cards. Then your shared disk storage is required, SAM is required. Why? Because we have seen all our database files are there along with backups plus error logs. All are there in the shared disk. Once again, remember in the SAM, how many drives are required here? One drive is required, which will work as a quorum drive. This quorum drive maintains, remember, cluster metadata. Quorum drive maintains cluster metadata. Means what? In this Windows cluster, how many nodes are there? How many IPs are there? Okay. So the same way, how many drives are there in the shared disk? The same way, which service is clustered, like SQL Server service is clustered, that complete metadata is there in Quorum drive. Second point, remember, second point, basically remember Quorum drive is for Windows cluster, generally, to maintain what? Windows cluster metadata along with our SQL cluster information. And we have seen, whenever first we have seen to deploy always on as well as Windows SQL cluster. Windows cluster is the base. Okay. Once we create Windows cluster, just remember one separate service is created. We have seen now cluster service in both them. And see, this cluster service is always running in both them. This cluster service uses this quorum drive to identify how many nodes are in the cluster, which is active node, which services are clustered, which is the shared disk store, what are the other drives are there in SAN. That complete information is verified by cluster service by using this quorum drive. Just remember quorum drive maintains, remember in shortcut we can understand cluster metadata. Generally said previously minimum we need 256 MB, but today we are going with 2 GB. Quorum drive size of what? 2 GB. Okay. Next one say like we need MSDTC. MSDTC is for replication or distributed transaction. MSDTC, which is optional actually, not compulsory. and one drive is required for SQL Server, at least minimum one drive. But generally for backups, data file, log files, for all those generally for 10 DB, separate drives we are using. Just remember to practice tomorrow in your laptop. One Quorum drive is required from the storage, one drive for SQL Server. Okay, minimum one drive for SQL Server. Generally, we are using in real time separate drives. We are DTC is required a distributed transaction coordinator, which is a Windows service actually. By default, it comes along with OS. Means what in clustered environment, if you want to configure the application and distributed transactions, generally we need this service, which is optional, not compulsory. Domain controller, already we know in the domain controller, the virtual name and virtual IP is configured, right? So why? Because request is submitted to domain controller will submit the request to which node active. Then say OS or service or application. So Windows is the OS, service means our SQL Server. Okay, this is like what are the very basic components of this here to configure two node cluster. Very simple prerequisites are this here to configure two node cluster. Okay, right.